Okay, episode 3 of Discovery is called Unearthed. We'll talk about it in a second. Hello out there, I'm the oldest nerd, and in episode 3, Unearthed, we have finally the uniting of Michael Burnham and the crew of Discovery. And at this point, we find, of course, at the end of the last episode, we found out that Burnham had been there for a year waiting for Discovery to show up. But she wasn't just sitting there. She wasn't just sitting in the co-pilot seat along with Book, but rather was learning the ways of the 32nd century by helping Book out by going on runs as a courier herself. She and Book would alternate using his ship, and she's learned some tricks along the line. And there's an old expression called going native, which indicates that you have adopted more of the habits of the place that you've gone to than of the people you came from. And while we won't say that she's gone that far, she certainly has a foot in both worlds now, and she is much more savvy of the galaxy as it is in this new time period, certainly than Discovery is. Has not lost her optimism that any member of Starfleet would have, but she's a little rusty on it, and it's shown there. Saru is taken very aback by the fact that there wasn't any competition for who would be the captain. The willingness of her to be just a regular crew member is something that we weren't quite sure whether it would work or not. And perhaps the characters themselves weren't certain if it would work or not. We now know that Giorgio has decided to dress up in an admiral's uniform because why not? Whether she has the power or not, she would take nothing less, no doubt. Few good lines here. Cake is eternal, which is to say that's one thing that does not change over the centuries. And it's revealed that Terrelysium, which is where they were all headed, exists, but when Burnham visited there, according to her account, nobody knew who her mother was, and it wasn't the same place that she thought it was going to be. So it looks like that Terrelysium is not going to be much of a destination or much talked about from here on out during this season. We find out that Earth is no longer the headquarters of the Federation. In fact, it's not even a member of the Federation anymore. They have now what is called the United Earth Defense Force. So it is a completely different organization and not nearly as open-handed as Starfleet was. They're a very defensive group of people, not quite trusting of anybody outside of Earth, and very much more isolated, very much more insular. This could be a process of the Federation breaking up, and with Earth being kind of a target as the headquarters of the Federation. It was agreed some 100 years earlier that perhaps the Federation headquarters ought to move somewhere else. And Earth is kind of now on its own, having been isolated from the rest of the planets that it was familiar with. They do have a nemesis who is an armada of ships that the Earth is defending itself from periodically, and Discovery gets in between them and finds out that one shot from their phasers is enough to knock out their shields. Obviously, they have to make a quick amount of diplomacy in order to survive. We know now that in the year that Burnham has been there, they've come up with quite a few different tactics. They don't tell us what they are, but there is an exchange between her and Book of trying to go through which one they're going to use, and it reminds me of the tactics that are used in Ocean's 11, where they describe in a shorthand of what kind of scam that they're going to run. So it's interesting along that line. Also, there is a callback to one of the first original series episodes to air, which was the Corbomite maneuver, in which the alien that they encounter wasn't quite as menacing as they expected it to be. There's an allusion made to that in this episode. Also, kind of a callback to the first time we ever saw a trill, which was in The Next Generation, where Beverly falls in love with a trill who then dies, and the symbiote is moved temporarily into Riker. And there is kind of a lack of compatibility there between Riker and the symbiote, and to save his life, they have to find another host for the symbiote. In this case, we have a trill who is implanted into a human, and in this case, there is a difficulty connecting between the symbiote and the mind rather than the body of the human involved. And this looks like something that will be a continuing story as we move along. They are searching for an admiral that was contacted the Federation outpost that we saw in a previous episode 12 years ago, Admiral Tal. And they went to Earth to find him because 12 years ago, that is where the signal originated from, even though, unbeknownst to the Discovery crew, Tal was not transmitting from the headquarters of the Federation, but just from Earth. They do go back to Earth, and they do get the opportunity to go down to the surface, and members of the crew actually went to a very huge oak tree that was on the grounds of Starfleet Academy. And rather than go into a city or see how things have changed technologically, they had to know if the tree was still there, the tree that in different years they had all studied under or used as a place to get away from the hustle and bustle of the Academy. And we're happy to see that the tree was there. It was a very human moment. It was a very coming home kind of moment that was very effective. And when you bring in the fact that Jonathan Frakes was the director of this episode, you understand the humanity of it, because he is one who does seem to find the humanity in the characters in which he is directing. It's quite able to be seen, for instance, in the episodes of Picard that he directed, most notably the one where Riker and Troy meet up with Picard. This is one that he directed as well. And these human moments, these small world kind of things. We're not talking big ships and big technology and big ideas, but rather just simple human feelings. This is something that Star Trek has always excelled in, just to focus on simple human feelings. And we see a lot of that in the reunion of Burnham and the Discovery crew, with Discovery arriving at Earth, with the crew seeing the oak tree on the grounds of Starfleet Academy. Interchanges between Saru and Burnham, and even in the warring parties, when it comes down to a time when they're forced to negotiate. These things are so Star Trek. And that, plus the visual scope of the episode, the ability to see Discovery spore jump again, and all of the little things that made this show so good. It goes into one of the better ones that Jonathan Frakes has directed, and only second, I would say, to the one that he acted in. So that's what we think right now of Unearthed. I'd like to know what you think. The second season of The Mandalorian on Disney Plus, that's coming up in the next video. So please subscribe and click the bell so you know when the next video is coming your way. While this show is still on, and while The Mandalorian is still on, we're going to be doing quite a few videos. We hope you don't miss any of them. Until next time, don't go far.